welcome to the Simple Worship Conversation. My name is Shannon Moore, and I am so glad to have with me today Reverend Kera Watts, who is our children's minister here at University Christian Church. You have been on the morning program with Shannon Moore before.
Yes,
but maybe just once.
Just one time. I figured. I think that was like early Shannon.
Early.
Yeah, it was like
program.
it was like the early.
All right.
The beginning days.
Well, I'm glad.
This feels different.
It does. Now that you know.
That's right.
I assume you watched
always. Of course.
Well, I wanted us to look at a scripture today that you and I have talked about a little bit before. Kera has a children's worship video or a worship service for children, and a couple of weeks ago asked me to participate in that video by using this scripture, and I wanted us to have a chance to talk about it since the children have heard it, and so you know the drill. I'm going to give a little background before I get reading today, and then I'll read the scripture, and then in keeping with the brevity of the simple worship style, I'll set a timer for 10 minutes. We'll just talk about it. Sound good?
Sounds perfect.
All right. So last week we were also in the Old Testament and talked about this time in between Moses and the kings where judges ruled the people of Israel. And so here we have a family from Bethlehem in Judah. There's a famine and they move to Moab. The husband is Elimelech and his wife is Naomi. They have 2 children, 2 sons. They marry Orpah and Ruth, and then all of the men die. So Naomi has decided she's going to go back to Judah, back to Bethlehem, where she's from, because the famine's over and she's just ready to return. Right. So that's where we're going to pick up with Ruth chapter 1. I'm going to start with verse 8. Okay? But Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-law, "Go back, each of you, to your mother's house. May the Lord deal kindly with you as you have dealt with the dead and with me. The Lord grant that you may find security, each of you in the house of your husband." Then she kissed them, and they wept aloud. They said to her, "No, we will return with you to your people." But Naomi said, "Turn back, my daughters. Why will you go with me? Do I still have sons in my womb, that they may become your husbands? Turn back, my daughters. Go your way, for I am too old to have a husband. Even if I thought there was hope for me, even if I should have a husband tonight and bear sons, would you wait until they were grown? Would you then refrain from marrying? No, my daughters, it has been far more bitter for me than for you, because the hand of the Lord has turned against me." Then they wept aloud again. Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth clung to her. So she said, "See, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and to her gods. Return after your sister-in-law." But Ruth said, "Do not press me to leave you or to turn back from following you. Where you go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die. There will I be buried. May the Lord do thus and so to me, and more as well, even if death parts me from you." When Naomi saw that she was determined to go with her, she said no more to her. And then they continued on their journey to Bethlehem. So that's the part I want to talk about. I'm starting the timer. All right. So what's this about?
It's about a lot of things. In the context that we talked about it for children in Compassion Camp, we talked about it in terms of being present with someone and walking along the way with someone. Mm-hmm. And so, my first impression of this is this idea that these people, these women had been through such hardships. They were brought together through marriage, mm-hmm. through these relationships. And then once those relationships fell away because the men died, and suddenly the women were just left really with nothing, because at the time there had to be these connections with men in order to have the things you needed, in order to have food and shelter and all of those things. And they were left with none of that. And yet they were still connected. They were still with one another. And that idea that Naomi said, I can see the future because I know it's not good. You all have to go back and you can start over. I don't have to do that.
She has every reason to go back. Her husband is dead. Her sons are dead. She knows people. I mean, she grew up in Bethlehem. That's where she's from. She's going to go back. She's going to maybe find some people who will help take care of her in her old age. And it seems that maybe I'm adding to this, but that she is concerned enough for their well-being that she wants for them a fresh start, a clean slate, find new husbands, and start over, and start your lives here with your people.
Right. They have an opportunity to start over, and she's going to go back home and figure that out for herself, and yet then you see this real difference between Ruth and Orpah too, which I think is such an interesting.
Well, but at first they have a similar reaction.
Right. First, they're all sad, and they all cling together
and cry
and are upset, and I imagine that it was incredibly painful to hear Naomi say, "I'm leaving." I mean, that had to be hard. I mean, they have lost the same loved ones together. They have grieved together. They have been through so much, and yet to hear, okay, and I'm going to leave, that would be a really hard transition, and that they in that moment figure out what they're going to do.
Well, and it sounds like also they just assumed that they needed to go with her.
That's true.
Because she's the matriarch now, so we go with her. That's the way it is.
Right.
We're as you said, we're connected to her because of our husbands.
Right.
And then I think it's sort of bold of Naomi to say, "No, I'm going by myself." And what really stands out to me when I read this a while ago, which I hadn't thought about before, but she says, "Go back to your people and to your gods."
Right.
So they have been worshiping apparently the God of Israel. I mean, here are Israelites in Moab continuing to be faithful to God in a foreign land, and now she's even saying, "Go back and worship your own gods." Do you think she was trying to get away from them? Are they painful reminders of her sons?
I never thought of that, but that makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
It makes a lot of sense, and this idea of maybe not knowing what she's going back to, and the responsibility of what that would look like going back into the situation when she goes back to Judah and Bethlehem. She doesn't know what she'll find there. She doesn't have. And she knows the famine's over, but that's all she knows.
But it's also 2 more mouths to feed.
Exactly.
I mean,
and she would be the matriarch of the family when a matriarch doesn't really have the power to provide for that family. And so I think in some ways there's that element. I don't know. I've never really thought of Naomi as being someone that was like, "No, seriously, I really want you to stay there." I think because just every time, I don't want you to come with me because it's just too much. But I think when I've never really thought about it from that perspective either.
Well, and neither have I, because we both have Baptist backgrounds, and I grew up. We were real hard on Orpah because she gave up. She turned her back. I mean, that was the story. That she turned her back.
Or we just ignore Orpah.
Right.
Like that's it's kind of like Orpah was there and then she just wasn't.
Right.
The real relationship was with Naomi and Ruth. The true relationship was there.
Right.
And so we focus on that. And even, interestingly, when you're looking at children's stories, you find that Orpah's not a part of any of the, stories that you can, videos, or they just forget. Orpah's just not a part of the story. But I think Orpah's such an important part of the story.
Well, and you mentioned when we were doing the children's thing, you mentioned something about her compassion.
Yes.
A different kind of compassion.
Right.
Will you share that?
I think just a different kind of compassion that she recognized that's what she needed for herself. That this compassion to care for herself and to hear Naomi and say, "It's okay for me to do this."
To honor her.
To honor that request and to honor what she needed to do and be by going back to her people and her gods. And I think that that's so hard. That part of compassion we don't talk about a lot.
Right, because we want to do for people, and sometimes it's too much.
Right.
I don't know. What else stands out to me is when, Ruth gives this impassioned speech, don't make me do this. I want to be with you. Naomi doesn't say hip hip hooray.
Right.
It just says she saw she was determined and said no more.
Right.
So it doesn't sound, the more we're talking about it,
Yeah.
I think she just really wanted to go by herself.
Yeah. That might have been a long trip back. That was a long way.
That's a long
go
walk.
up and around. That was a long way to go. But yeah, it might have been a long trip with.
So I always like to ask, how does this story speak to us in our Christian faith? Is there a message for us?
For me, what stands out is something that's different. That is, certainly our conversation today has made me think differently about what that Naomi and Ruth relationship is. But for me, it's paying attention to Orpah, and recognizing that we are called to different things, and that's okay. And to listen to that, and to listen in the midst of these circumstances that God is working in that in ways, and to being true to caring for ourselves, which I think sometimes from a Christian standpoint, we're always talking of outward things, which is obviously incredibly important, but also being intentional about who we are and caring for ourselves so that we have the energy and the compassion to share with others. So for me, kind of in a new perspective, that's what stands out to me.
It reminds me a little bit of when Jesus healed the demoniac and he wanted to go with him, and Jesus said no.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, I have things to go do, and you do too. I think in those moments, it's Jesus saying, and you do too, here.
Right. Not everybody is called to be in this, this small group, but you can still tell the story. You can still share the gospel.
Right.
And, maybe I wish we had Orpah's story, what came next, but maybe she continued to worship the God of Israel. Maybe she didn't return to her old gods. Maybe she was. Who knows? Yeah. It's we only have about 45 seconds left. So, any final thoughts?
I'm glad we got to talk about this.
I am too.
It's an important story.
I love this story, and I like the twist that we kind of found in it. So I guess the message for us is to be compassionate, and compassion may not be the easy way, it may not be the comfortable way or the popular.
Right. Because each of the women in the story were compassionate. Naomi was compassionate in trying to release and help these women, and also no matter what that relationship was with Ruth, she still went, and also with Orpah, and saying it's okay to go.
Yep. Well, that's a good thing, because
it's okay to go.
It's time to go. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm glad that we've had a couple of opportunities to be even in just this little section.
Right.
And the rest of the book is so rich as well.
It's such a beautiful story.
It is. So read Ruth and find out what happened. We don't know what happened to Orpah, but you can find out what happened to Ruth. So
great story.
I hope that you've enjoyed the conversation. I certainly have. And we will see you next time. Have a great week.